The United States has undergone 7 great ages: the age of the Federalists, the age of the Jeffersonians or Democratic Republicans, the Democratic age, the Republican age, the Progressive age, the age of the New Deal, and the Neo or New Age. One might also simplify these into 3 epochs, 3 timeframes which saw to the evolution of 3 distinct ideologies. Now America stands at the crossroads of another great change, the beginning of another age, another era which is breaking with the interventionist, neoconservative, neoliberal establishment, but what precisely America is becoming is not entirely clear, but there are several hints. Before we go any further, I'd like to take a moment to thank everyone who's donated to us on Patreon, Utreon, and right here on YouTube through channel memberships. Your donations really go a long way to keeping this channel going, and by donating to us across any of these platforms, you'll get access to some great perks including physical merch, a custom-designed flag wallpaper, and access to an exclusive members-only Discord server where you can enter your scenarios for a chance to have them made into full videos. You can follow the pop-up on screen here, go to the comments section or description to visit any of these pages and support our channel, and of course you can do so by clicking the join button right below this video. If you can't donate anything, consider subscribing and sharing this video to help the channel out. Now, back to the video. It's tempting to look at Donald Trump's break with the establishment and say, here is the new direction in which America will be moving. However, there are a number of additional trends to consider before we make this final judgment. Trends which would suggest that the future of the United States will not swing back in a conservative direction as many believe, but that it will become more liberal and more democratic. Firstly is the trend of democratization. Putting aside the swing of economic policy, the history of the United States has been one of constant democratization, expanding political power to those who lack it. The nation envisioned by men like Washington, Hamilton, and Marshall was not a democratic nation in the sense that we would interpret the word today. The Federalists desired a country ruled by a moral and patriotic elite, an aristocracy of virtue. The Jeffersonians believed that power should rest in the hands of landed men, men who owned a physical stake in the country and were thus self-sufficient as to not rely on the government. The Democrats believed that all free white men should be free to vote, regardless of their wealth. The Republicans of course expanded the franchise to all male citizens regardless of race. The Progressives expanded the right to women. New Dealers made the concept of fighting for democracy beyond America's borders a staple of American belief. And the neoconservatives and neoliberals have since sought to both democratize abroad and reduce the barriers for participation in the United States as much as possible, to the point that some cities and municipalities in the US have attempted to open voting rights to non-citizens. Use of mail-in ballots have become widespread, talks of lowering the voting age even further have become commonplace across several states, and politicians commonly challenge the concept of requiring legal identification to vote. Democratization has been and may very well remain a mainstay of American politics, which, if that is the case, would prevent any conservative faction from making political progress. But we're also faced with the question of how far can this go? In recent years there has been significant backlash to increased democratization, and so there have emerged arguments to the contrary. Talks of raising the voting age, requiring testing to vote, limiting voting to 1 vote per family household instead of per individual, and some states have even amended their constitutions to explicitly require citizenship to vote. Democratization is likely to become a key issue in the immediate future, as it will be one of the fundamental irreconcilable differences between Republicans and Democrats, greatly favoring one over the other. This would also translate to international democratism, which has already been challenged by Donald Trump's rolling back of American foreign participation, and which future Republicans may take an even harder stance on. Secondly is the trend of liberalization, which does in part go hand in hand with democratization. American social values have largely grown more tolerant, progressive, and liberal over time, and understandably so. As the country becomes more well-to-do and issues of need were alleviated, the kind of conservatism and caution based in matters of survival and protecting various traditions or institutions vanished, being replaced by an idealistic social radicalism which, having identified a period of plentiful as a baseline, questions why things cannot be made better and lashes out when the quality of life falls below that baseline. Simply put, the radicalism or desire for change is much stronger on the side of the left than it is for the right. The American left has recognized the current system as unsatisfactory for one reason or another, and will go to extreme lengths to change that, whereas the American right wants to conserve a rapidly eroding status quo which, while they are unsatisfied with it, are comfortable enough to continue within it. The political transformations and alignments of the youngest generation are what will determine if America continues down a course of liberalization, as it will be these generations that have and very well might continue to endure decline in the American standard of living before things improve. In this regard, the left holds a firmer grip over a larger contingent of the youth population. However, the American right is also seeing the emergence of a more radical than conservative youth population, radical in the sense of opposing the status quo and seeking to change it significantly. Thirdly is the trend of immigration and national power. The Hispanic population is already on course to comprise at least a quarter of the total US population by 2050, and is the second fastest growing minority population in the US, second only to Asians, who comprise a much smaller percentage of the population. Given historic immigration and political trends, this Hispanic population will likely constitute a major, if not one of the leading political forces in the country in a matter of years, with its power concentrated in the Southwest, perhaps in Texas, California, or Arizona. At present, the Hispanic American population favors the Democrat Party by a 2-to-1 margin, though this is skewed by the party's pro-democratization and pro-immigration positions likely to lose favor as Hispanics settle in as a population with roots and institutions in the Southwest, or at least that's what the Republican Party would argue. What we are seeing is that much as with the general youth population, many later generational Hispanic Americans are continuing to support left-wing policy, with those who do not falling into two general categories: a population of moderately conservative, assimilated and typically Protestant Hispanics, and a more radical right-wing Catholic faction. The politics of the Hispanic American population are likely to evolve, however, given present trends, would still appear to favor the American left over the right, placing a higher emphasis on issues relating to government services and economic equality. Fourthly, largely Democratic populations are expanding out from urban areas to suburban and rural communities, eroding the conservative stranglehold over these areas. This has been driven by both the expansion of urban areas and by urban populations seeking a lower cost of living. We're also seeing a transplanting of northern and western urban populations to southern cities through both a seeming reversal of the Great Migration and on account of a perception of greater economic opportunities in these southern cities, tilting these largely red states further and further blue, as in the case of Texas, Georgia, North Carolina, and Virginia. The conservative hold over crucial states like Florida, Texas, North Carolina, Georgia, and Ohio are terribly narrow for what should be reliable strongholds, none breaking over 55% support in the 2020 election. These are the states with the highest number of individual electoral votes that Republicans can realistically expect to swing their direction, with the exceptions of Pennsylvania and Michigan, and the fact is that every one of those states, with the exception of Texas for the time being, are swing states. What this means is that the states that the Republican Party depends the most upon are among the states whose politics are most vulnerable to change as the demographics shift. As trends stand, if the Republican Party doesn't follow through with its ideological transformation, it will become utterly incapable of winning future elections. Those are the trends working against the American right, but there are also general trends that we can expect to see across both parties regardless of who dominates politics. Firstly, the United States will begin to withdraw from its role as a global hegemon. As we stated in the conclusion of our last 7 Ages of America video, the American public has grown tired of the obligations of a superpower, and whether on the right or left, younger generations are seeking an end to America's foreign policy focus and a return to a domestic focus. The American right has adopted a more extensive stance on this matter, but on the left too there are concerns over American wealth and energy being spent abroad instead of at home to tackle domestic issues, especially as younger generations struggle with the expenses of housing, healthcare, education, and more, even despite a slight resurgence in foreign interest in response to the conflict between Russia and Ukraine. Hispanic Americans also factor into this, with foreign policy being ranked among the lowest concerns of this demographic. Secondly, the United States will abandon the small government approach to power and become more internally interventionist. Faced with mounting issues that neither side is truly taking the initiative to solve, the youngest generations of both parties largely agree that Reagan and Clinton-style hands-off policies have failed and demand a more activist government that will enforce order and regulation, whether that be on policies like gun control and environmentalism, or on tariffs and cracking down on crime. Whatever side ends up in charge, the United States will see greater participation from the federal government in a fashion unseen since the Progressive and New Deal eras. Thirdly, the United States will see a revitalization of domestic production and the further development of infrastructure. Already presidents from both parties have agreed upon the need to bring back American manufacturing from overseas, restore energy independence, and expand national infrastructure systems. Though that being said, both the American right and left have differing visions on what precisely that will look like and entail. The neglecting of domestic matters during the neo-era have left the United States to fall behind other countries in many regards, including the quality of our buildings and infrastructure. Many who have grown up with these outdated systems and sense an overall stagnation in the growth of the country demand modernization and innovation. transportation systems that are fast, efficient, and wide-reaching, roads and buildings that are well-maintained, public buildings that are sturdy, functional, and beautiful, access to modern essentials like electricity, phone, and internet service. Beyond this, Americans are tired of relying on foreign countries for essential products and resources, especially when those countries are potentially hostile or risk dragging the country into foreign conflicts. Because of this, the country will begin weaning itself off of foreign imports and resources and begin redeveloping domestic manufacturing and resource extraction. Simply put, what this all translates to is that the United States, regardless of which party holds dominance over the next several years, will gradually begin moving towards self-focus and self-sufficiency once again, with this serving as the unifying ideology of this newly emerging era. Though that being said, the drive for this is particularly more pronounced on the American right, and there are still significant deviations in the social ideology of both parties, with a strong likelihood that it will be the social ideology of the Democrat Party that dominates in this era given past trends. That is of course purely hypothetical, and it will take some years before it's clear which party will dominate, but it does seem that this will be the direction the country moves in. The US of Z thanks you for watching. Be sure to check out the rest of the 7 Ages series if you haven't already, like the video if you enjoyed it, and subscribe for more. Mr. Z, out.